Hello, good day. My name is Ade. You're welcome to the Microsoft SQL Server DBA Bootcamp powered by Await Services. Um, in the topic 1A of this bootcamp curriculum, we talked about how to set up the Microsoft SQL Server DBA lab. So I believe by the time you're watching this recording, you must have set up your lab successfully. So this topic or module will be introducing you to SQL Server. Let's get started. So I usually like to start with this disclaimer that I'm only providing you with the skills that would enable you to become a Microsoft SQL Server database administrator, but I'm not guaranteeing anyone a job before, during, or after the training. So before we get started fully, let's take a look at this quiz of the day. And this is the question. So it says, what are the available deployment options in Microsoft Azure and their differences? So feel free to use online resources to answer this question. And when we meet in the Q&A session, we'll talk more about it in depth. So what is Microsoft SQL Server? It is a relational database management system developed by Microsoft, and it is used for to support transaction processing. If you have any applications that have transactions running on it, or you have a bunch of data historically that you want to store, you can also use SQL Server for that, and that is the data warehousing, basically for storing historical data. Also, it is used for business intelligence because from this historical data, we can derive patterns, trends, insights that will help to make informed business decisions. And of course, there are other services that Microsoft SQL Server offers, such as SQL Server Integration Services, SQL Server Analytical Services, and SQL Server Reporting Services. All these will help when it comes to business intelligence as well as data analytics. So, over the years, SQL Server have proven to be very robust when it comes to performance. And of course, it is affordable compared to other relational database management systems. For example, Oracle. Oracle is much more expensive in terms of license cost compared to Microsoft SQL Server. And because SQL Server is also developed by Microsoft, which is a household name and has good reputation, so all these reasons are why most companies adopt Microsoft SQL Server as their choice of relational database management system. So SQL Server was first released in 1989, and since then they've come up with different versions as well as editions up until year 2022. Now on the next slide, we are going to explore the different versions as well as the different editions of SQL Server. So this chart or this picture right here shows the evolution of SQL Server, which are the different versions over the years. But we are starting from 2008. There are other versions prior to 2008, but we are starting from 2008. And we are also showing all the different features that each version has brought. for the clients. If you take a look at this top part, these are the different features that have been brought to the clients by these different versions. So starting from SQL Server 2008, they brought performance and productivity. And part of that is that we are now able to compress database. There's policy-based management, and then there's programmability. So in the same year, another version was released, which is 2008 R2. And I think this is the only year that two versions were released. The other years, the other versions are just one version per year. So in 2008 R2, they brought self-service BI. BI means business intelligence. Okay. So with business intelligence, we have the Power Pivot in memory feature, and this was not available in the 2008. It started in the 2008 R2. Then we have the SharePoint integration, as well as the master data services. These features enable us to do self-service business intelligence. Okay. Now moving on. After 2008, no version was released until 2012. So that means there's no version in 2009, there's none in 2010, there is none in 2011 until 2012. So in 2012, the version brought cloud-ready features to the clients. So then we had this feature known as always on, which we're going to talk more about during the bootcamp. Then there's in-memory column store. This has to do with indexing. And there's data quality services. There's Power View. And then we had the opportunity of cloud services. And that is why it's called Cloud Ready. Okay, so this was the first version where we had the opportunity of cloud services in SQL Server. Then after 2012, in 2013, there's no version that was released. But then in 2014, we had another version. And then in 2014, the feature that was brought was mission and critical cloud performance. You can see these are here. Okay. So then we they brought this in-memory across workloads. There's hybrid cloud optimized. So now you remember that in 2012 we had the cloud services, but here they improve it, the feature for optimization. And then we have the HD Insight service. So HD Insight service is a feature on Azure. There's Azure HD Insight that is used to process or do big data analytics using historical data or data that we get from live streaming, such as Internet of Things. Devices that are connected to the internet and they generate data on the fly. For example, cameras. Cameras will always record what's happening. So these are live data. So this is a feature that is used to process such data. And then, of course, there's cloud business intelligence. So after 2014, no version was released in 2015. Then a new one was released in 2016. So in 2016, this new feature was born, the built-in ML. ML means machine learning. Okay, ML means machine learning. So in 2016, we now started using SQL Server to do machine learning. So machine learning basically is, training data to detect trends and patterns, and then we can then use those patterns or trends to make prediction about the future. So we had this built-in ML, and of course this one that we had from 2014, and then cloud engineering, and of course the cloud BI. Then other features too came in 2016, such as query store and some other features. Then in 2017, we had a new version, and then that was when SQL Server had this Docker and Linux feature. So this Docker and Linux feature is mostly used by DevOps. So the Docker is like a container for putting codes or for saving codes. So it's mostly used by DevOps. So that started in 2017. And then of course it still has the feature from the previous version, which are the built-in ML and then the cloud BI and other stuff. So after 2017, there was no version released in 2018, but then we had a new version in 2019. And then in 2019, we had this feature, Spark and HDFS. So Spark is used for big data analytics, and then HDFS is the distributed file system that enables us to save files across multiple machines, across multiple drives. And I think this is the same concept we use when we are doing striped backup, where you can back up a database across multiple files and even across multiple drives. So these are the different versions. Then after 2019, we have 2022. And there's a lot more feature in 2022. But try to explore these yourself on the Microsoft documentation. So these are the different versions and then the different features that came with them over the years. So it's been a bit of evolution since 2008 up until 2022. So this is there's a typical interview questions that come from here, and that interviewers can ask you to mention the versions of SQL Server from a particular year, for example, 2008. So these are the versions that you have to mention. And you cannot say there's 2009 because there's no version in 2009. There's none in 2010. There's none in 2011. There is none in 2013. There is none in 2015. And there is none in 2018. So please take note of all these versions. So now let's talk about the editions. Okay. So the versions are like the year SQL Server was released, but the editions are the different, more like a different license package in a way. So basically, we have two. We have two broad types. We have the free editions. These are the ones that are free. Then we have the paid ones. Okay. So on the left are the free editions, and these are the Express edition, Developer edition, and Evaluation edition. So for the fact that they are free, of course, there will always be a catch. So for the Express, there's a limitation. Okay. So the database that you can have on an Express edition, the size of that database cannot be more than 10 gigabytes in size. You cannot have a database whose size is more than 10 gigabytes if you are using Express edition. And also, you cannot have Express edition on a server that has more than 4 cores. So it is limited to one physical CPU or 4 cores. So if you have a computer that has more than this, then you're going to have to get a different edition, not Express edition. If you want to use more than 4 cores for your SQL Server, then you're going to have to get Express edition. Okay. And then for each edition, you can have different versions. So the same Express edition, there's 2016 version, there's 2017, there's 2019, there's 2022. There's all those versions in the same edition. Okay. Another edition is the developer. So for the developer, there's no limitation in terms of features, what you can do, or how much CPU you can use with it, or the size of database that you can have on it. See, it is fully functional. It has everything. You can do everything on it, but you can only use it for development or test purposes. You cannot use it for production purpose, which means that you cannot connect a client-facing application to a database that you have on a developer edition. You can't do that. So if you need an edition that has all the features, but you need to use it for production, you're going to have to get a different edition. And that will be under the paid edition, which we're going to talk about later, shortly. So the third free edition is evaluation. So just like the developer, the evaluation edition is also fully functional. It has all the available features, but you can only have it for 180 days. You can only have it for 180 days. After 180 days, it will expire. You will not have access to it again. So 180 days is approximately 6 months. So if you need something temporarily, and you want to have access to all the features, this is a good one to have. And of course, you want it, if something free, this is a good one to have. And you cannot use this one for production purpose as well. You can only use it for testing and all that. Because if you need something for production, I don't think you want to need it for just 180 days since you're going live with your application. So even though the limitation does not say you can't use it, is if you need something for production, it's better to get something paid because of this expiration, 180 days expiration. So let me correct that. You can use this for production, but because of these 180 days, you may not want to use this. Yes. So now let's go to the paid editions. Under the paid editions, we have Enterprise. So with Enterprise, you have all the features that you need. You have all the features that you need, but of course, you have to pay for it. There's no limitations at all. It does not expire. You can use it for production. The only thing is you have to pay for the license. There's also Enterprise Core. Here you pay per core, by the number of CPU core on your server. So that's why it says core-based licensing. Okay. So the previous Enterprise is limited to just 20 cores. This one is limited to just 20 cores, but this Enterprise Core, you can go beyond 20 CPU cores. Then another paid edition is Standard. But Standard, even though you're paying for it, the features, it does not have as many features as the Enterprise. And that is why it is not as expensive as the Enterprise in terms of the licensing cost. Okay, so if you think you don't need all the features that the Enterprise offers, then and you need it for production where the license will not expire, then you want to get a standard. As long as the features that you need are available on that standard edition. And then we have the cloud-based one, which is also another paid one. That is the Azure SQL database. This is also paid, but it is available on Microsoft Azure, which is the cloud service platform by Microsoft. It's also called Platform as a Service, also known as PaaS. So all of these, you pay for them. Okay, all of these you pay for them. But these ones on the left, you don't pay for them, but they have limitations. Okay, so there are two links here, or you can just go on Microsoft web page to read more or learn more about these editions. So let's talk about SQL Server Configuration Manager, which after installing SQL Server will be on your system because it's a graphical user interface where you manage the configuration of SQL Server. And apart from the SQL Server, so there are a lot of services that come with SQL Server. So we have the SQL Server database engine, we have the SQL Server analytical services, we have the SQL Server integration services, we have SQL Server reporting services. But if you do a basic installation of SQL Server, the services you are seeing on the picture here are what you would get if you do a basic installation. So this first one here, this is the database engine. This is the database engine. And then you have the SQL Server browser, which is currently stopped. As you can see, it's now running. And then we have the SQL Server agent. This one is currently running. So these are the three services you would see. If you see here, it says SQL Server services. If you did a basic installation of SQL Server. So let's break it down. What each of these. So the database engine, this is like the main engine of SQL Server. You know, this is what controls SQL Server itself. Where it controls SQL Server, where the data is saved and all that. But the SQL Server browser, if you have multiple instances on your server, and this enables you to juggle between one instance and the other. It helps to resolve the port to know which instance you want to connect to. Because on one single VM, you can have multiple instances. I think up to maybe 99 or something. You can have up to 99, I'm not sure, is it 99 or 50 instances on one virtual machine. So, but if you have just one instance, and that instance is a default instance, then this SQL Server browser will be disabled and stopped. Will not be run. It is not needed, pretty much. But if you have a named instance, then this has to be running so that you can connect. Then we have the SQL Server agent. As the name implies, is what is responsible for running scheduled jobs and alerts because it's an agent. It's what you use to automate jobs, to schedule them to run at certain times, and of course to send alerts if something happens. So these are the basic services you will see on the configuration manager if you install the basic SQL Server features. But if you select other features, you will see You would see analytical service. You see analytical service. You would see integration service, which are not here, and of course reporting service. But those are not here because we didn't install those. We didn't select those when we were installing SQL Server. Okay. So, like I mentioned earlier, there are two instances in SQL Server. We have the default instance and we have the named instance. So how do you differentiate the default instance? So the default instance, the name of the default instance, here's my mouse. Yeah, the name of the default instance will be MS SQL Server. This is what you have here. This is how you know that it's a default instance. You see MS SQL Server here on the configuration manager, then that is default instance. MS SQL Server in parentheses, then that is default instance. That's how you identify a default instance on the configuration manager. But a named instance will have any name other than MS SQL Server. A named instance will have any name other than this name. So it's a name that you give it. It's a named instance. You have to give it that name yourself. You can call it whatever you like. So for example, you can say await. But we don't have that here. So what you're seeing here on the configuration manager is just a default instance. And then you can only have one default instance. I mentioned that you may have up to, I think, 99. Please do your research, don't quote me on this, but I think it's 99 instances on one virtual machine. You may have up to 99 instances, but only one instance can be default. Only one instance can be a default instance. The remaining 98 instances will be named instances. You have to give them a certain name. Okay? Yeah, please, this is also very important to know. These are typical interview questions. So you can have multiple services. You can have the database engine. You can have this. You can have analytical service. You can have integration. You can have reporting. But if you install basic features, you will only have the database engine. And that is what we have here at the top here. This is the database engine. And you have the agents. And you have the browser. So the browser is only necessary if you have a named instance. Once you have a named instance, then this browser will become active. But right now, because I don't have a named instance, it is stopped. So there are two types of instances in SQL Server, the default and the named. How do you identify a default instance? If you go on Configuration Manager and you see MS SQL Server in front of the SQL Server service, then this is a default. But if you see a name or any name other than MS SQL Server, for example, if you see await, then that is a named instance because that name was given. It is not the default. This is default. It comes from SQL Server or from Microsoft. Okay, but any other name is given by the person who installed it, and that's the name. That's why it's called a named instance. And you can have up to 99, which I'm not sure. I'm going to double check. Give me 1 second. Let me quickly double check that. Okay, it's 50. Yep, sorry. Not 99, it's 50. Yeah, I know if it's not 50, it's 99. So it's actually 50. Can have up to 50 instances. So of those 50 instances, only one of those 50 instances can be default, and the remaining, this will be 49. Sorry about that. Yep, the remaining 49 will be named, but not many. You hardly see a server that would have up to 50. It's usually maybe just, for the most part, just one instance, which is the default. Or some will have the named without a default. Some will have a combination of default and named, but it's not usually a lot, maybe maximum 5. Because if you put a lot of instances there, all those instances will share the resources on that server, and it may not be enough for all of them. So there's no point. And of course, if you have multiple instances on the server, if something happens to that server, all the instances will be down. Because they are using the same memory, they're using the same storage, they're using the same CPU. So if something happens to all those resources, all the instances will be inaccessible or will be down, and you don't want that. Okay, so the configuration manager is where we manage the configuration of SQL Server. So as long as this service is running, this database engine, we can access SQL Server. But once it stops running, nobody can access SQL Server. As long as this agent is running, all the jobs that we schedule will run. But once this agent is stopped, even if we have scheduled jobs, they will not run, because this is the service that is responsible for running those agents. If you have a if you have a named instance, if this SQL Server browser is not working, you will not be able to connect to your named instance. But if you have default, just like I have here, then you don't need the SQL Server browser. All right, let's move on. So we're going to do a demo of how we can do some changes here that would affect connectivity and the functionality of SQL Server based on what we modify on the configuration manager. So this slide talk about SQL Server Management Studio. This is a graphical user interface, just like the configuration manager, but this helps us to perform database administration tasks. So what this Management Studio does is just to help us communicate with the database engine. It is not the actual SQL Server. It is just an interface to communicate with database engine. And let me mention this. There are multiple ways of communicating with the database engine. SQL Server Management Studio, also known as SSMS, is one of those ways. PowerShell is another way. So it is possible not to use SSMS to communicate, and you may decide to use PowerShell. Another way to communicate with the engine is if you use command prompt. So let me number one. These are the 3 ways that I know. There could be other ways. I'm just saying the ones that I know that I'm familiar with. Number 1 is SSMS, which is SQL Server Management Studio. Number 2 is PowerShell. Number 3 is command prompt. With these 3 ways, you can communicate with the database engine. But out of these 3 ways, only SSMS is user friendly because it is an interface. You can click on stuff. You can right click. You can left click. You can it's friendly. It has visual. But PowerShell is not user friendly. Of course, command prompt is not user friendly. So that's why a lot of people use the Management Studio because it's the most user friendly out of all these ways. And we'll explore this in more detail when we do the demo. Okay, guess it's time for demo. So let me fire up my VM. Looks like I'm already connected to one. All right, so let me start from the icon. I already have it pinned to my taskbar. So here is the icon for SQL Server Configuration Manager. See, it has an icon that looks like a case where you put maintenance stuff, like a toolbox. Yeah. This is for Configuration Manager. Config Manager. And this icon right here, this is SSMS. See, they're not exactly the same, so it's easy to differentiate between them. So I have mine pinned, but what if you just install SQL Server and you need to look for this configuration manager? So in order to do that, come to the bottom left, click on the Windows icon and type config. Once you type config, it will bring you here. You will bring out all these options for you, and you will see this guy. So I have SQL Server 2016 Configuration Manager because I installed the 2016 version. If you install a different version, that is the configuration manager you will see there. For example, if you install 2019, then you will see SQL Server 2019 Configuration Manager. And if you search for this and you can't find it, that means you have not installed SQL Server. Okay? All right. And also for SSMS, if you want to search for that after installation, just type SSMS and then bam, you see it here. See? So as at the time of recording this video, the latest version is version 19. So you see SQL Server Management Studio 19. Okay. If you search for it and you can't find it, that means you have not installed SSMS on your server or on your virtual machine. Okay, so that's how. So once you find them, open them and then pin them to your taskbar. Let me show you how to do that again. So config and click on it once you find it. Say yes. So once it opens, down here, Configuration Manager, right click and then click on pin to taskbar. I've already pinned mine. That is why it's showing me to unpin. But if you have not pinned yours, then you have that option to pin. And you do the same for SSMS. So this is the Configuration Manager right here. And once you click on the left pane, click on SQL Server Services and you will see other services there. So this is the basic. From looking at this, we know that okay, this is a basic installation because we only have the SQL Server engine service and the agent. No reporting, no analytics, no integration. Okay. So here I said this is what controls the engine itself. So as long as this is running, we can connect. Because once it's stopped, we will not be able to connect. That's one. And then the start mode is automatic. What this means is that if we ever restart this server, this service, this SQL Server service would start running automatically by itself. It will start itself automatically. But if we change it to manual, If we restart SQL Server, it will not start by itself. We would have to go and start the service before it would start running. And this logon as, that is the service account that is running this service, this database engine service. That's the service account. And it is recommended to use an Active Directory account because it is more secured instead of using the default account, the NT service account that comes when you install SQL Server. All right. So yeah, there are other things that you can do on the configuration manager apart from starting and stopping the service. So right here, if I click on the database engine service and I right click, see, I can start. This option is not available because it's currently running, but I can stop, I can pause, I can resume, I can restart, then you can check the properties. So if I click on properties, so if you are doing always on, this is where you will enable always on. Okay. If you need to change the service account for one reason or the other, this is where you come to change service account. Just click browse and you go and find that Active Directory account and change it. So these are for if you need to change the start mode here, if you want to change it to manual instead of automatic, you can do that here. If you want to disable it, but don't disable it. If you disable it, then you lose access to your engine. And then some other information here for you. The host name, that's the name of the server on which you install SQL Server. You can see the state that it's currently running. You can't change this one. The only thing you can change here is the start mode. The other things cannot be changed. They're just for informational purpose. Okay. Then startup parameters. So this is the file location for this. This is the location for these files. The first one tells us where the master data file is. This is needed before this engine can start. It is needed for this because there are some information here that will enable the engine to start or to keep it running. So this is the path to that file. The next one is the path to the error log file. In case there's any error or any information you want to troubleshoot or look for, everything is recorded in the error log. And the last one is the path to the log file of the master database. The first one is the data file of the master database. The last one is the log file of the master database. The middle one is the error log. So all these three are very important to start this service. That's why it's called startup parameters. So if any of these files get missing, you may not be able to start the service. Okay, let's look at the advanced. So a lot of things here are just for informational purpose. The only thing that you can change here is error reporting, dump directory, or customer feedback reporting. And I would advise that you don't mess with these settings here, just leave them as is. But here you can get some important information, to know what edition you have. See, it says Enterprise Evaluation Edition. You can know the version here. 13 means 2016. 14 is 2017. And then 15 is 2019. Yeah, so basically that, and then the service pack level, that's SP2. So these are the different updates that they release for this particular version. But the current one that I have is SP2. You can also, apply new updates to take it to a different service pack level. We're going to talk more about that too when we do patching during the bootcamp. And then this is the dump directory, tells you where things are being dumped, and then whether or not you want error reporting. So let's not mess with these settings. So file stream is if you are dealing with data that need to be like videos or images and stuff like that. That's what this is used for. But we're not going to deal with such data, so we don't need to enable file stream. So that's pretty much the properties here and some of the things that we can do here on Management Studio. So if you ever need, sometimes we may need to move the location of these files. If you need to move the location of the master data file, we come here to make that change. The same for error log, the same for the log file of the master database. All right. So let's come here to, for the agents, you can start, stop, resume, pause, resume, restart. For the properties, see, it has fewer properties compared to the engine. Here you can change the service account that is running the agent. And then here you can change the start mode. The recommended is automatic, so that anytime you restart, it will just start itself. So we are not going to mess with that. And if you come to advanced, you see pretty much what we saw on the engine properties. Whether you want to do customer feedback reporting and the directory, the path to the dump directory, and whether or not you want to report error. So if you click on each of these, it will tell you what it means down here. Okay. See, Visual Server name, if cluster equals to yes, indicate whether this activity is running and this activity is updated, blah 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 blah. And, all right. But this is just to get you familiar with the configuration manager. So the next one, after the services, you can click on the SQL Server network configuration. This is 32 bits, so we're not gonna do that. So here, the native client protocols, you can create an alias as well. Sometimes a server can have multiple aliases, which is like, just like when human beings have aliases. So you can call them by their real name or you can call them by their alias. So SQL Server 2 can have aliases. So you can connect to SQL Server by its real name or you can connect by its alias. So if you double click on client protocols, you see all this information here. So it is usually recommended to enable all of these because these are some of the ways by which you connect. These are the ways through which we connect to SQL Server. Sometimes we use the TCP/IP, sometimes we use named pipes. It depends on the application that is trying to connect. Some applications connect through these, some connect through named pipes. Okay, so but you can change this. If you right click and go to properties. So right now it is enabled, but you can change it to, if you click no, it will no longer be enabled. And some other settings here. Then this is the port through which you connect through to SQL Server 1433. This is the default port. You can also change this port if you want, but I don't want us to mess with anything here. This is the default port. So if they ever ask you during an interview what the default port of SQL Server is, it is 1433 for the TCP/IP. So if you come here, right click for named pipes, click on properties, is enabled. You can also change it to no. Then the default pipe is this, and you don't want to mess with this. Don't worry yourself too much about all of this, just to get you familiar with them. You can create alias here. If you right click on it, you create new alias, and then you can connect to it with that alias. So here, SQL Server network configuration, more like what we saw earlier. If you double click on this, we get these three guys. So right now, the name pipe is disabled. So if you have an application that needs to connect through name pipe, then you have to enable this guy and then restart SQL Server service. If you just enable without restarting, then the change is not complete. So let's try to do that, and you see that prompt. So right click, properties, come to enable, change it to yes, click apply. See, it says any changes made will be saved. However, they will not take effect until the service is stopped and restarted. See that? So, and then here you see all of these too. So these are just, basically the control how we connect to SQL Server. Okay, all these ones here. Even here, because if this is not running, you cannot connect. So everything pretty much here controls how we connect to SQL Server. Okay, so let's pull up the SQL Server Management Studio by clicking on this icon. Okay, so our server is VM02. We are using the Windows Authentication, so I'll click Connect. All right, see, now I'm able to connect. And the reason is because this guy is running. If this service stops running, I will not be able to connect. So let's demo that. So let me disconnect. So if you can't, oh, sorry, let me take you around the Management Studio before we do that. So let me delete this one. On the Management Studio, which is an interface through which we communicate. So if you come to Files, or File rather, you can connect Object Explorer. You can open a new file for your projects. You can open a file. You can open analysis services and database engine query and stuff like that. You can create new ones. You can open existing ones. You can save, query windows and stuff. And of course, you can exit. If you come to edit, you can do a bunch of stuff. Come to view. You can go to Object Explorer details. You can create registered servers, which we're going to talk about later. Template Explorer that will give you pre-written codes or queries. Solution Explorer as well. A bookmark window and some other stuff here. If you come to tools, you have features like SQL Server Profiler. We're going to talk more about this too. We are doing performance tuning. You have the Database Engine Tuning Advisor, Azure Data Studio, which is also another GUI. You can migrate to Azure, which is cloud, from on-prem. Code Snippet Manager. If you have some pre-written code here, you can access them here with using this Code Snippet Manager. Some code are already pre-written inside of Management Studio. You can use external tools. You can check for updates if you need the latest version of the studio. You can do import and export if you want to import or export data. You can do some customization to change the appearance of the Management Studio. And of course, you can do some options here. Here you can change the appearance and do a lot of things here. And you look at the options. So if you come to window, you can change also the layout of your window. And if the layout ever get distorted, you can reset that. And then if you come to help, you can get technical support. It will take you to a link where you can, see how you can get technical support. And if you want to know more about this software, which is the Management Studio, click about. It will tell you, the current version is 19.00. The operating system is this, the .NET is this, and some other stuff that you may not need to worry yourself about for now. Okay. So this is the Object Explorer. For every instance we connect to, it would show on the Object Explorer here. So this is VM02. So if you come to server type, these are the services I was talking to you about. See, you have the database engine, you have the analysis. Okay, sorry, it is analysis, not analytical. Analysis services, you have reporting services, you have integration services, and you have Azure SSIS integration runtime. So these are all the services that are available. But you only see the database engine if you do basic installation. if you didn't install a lot of features. Then here, the server name is where you put the server, the name of the server you want to connect to. Right now, I only have my VM02, but if you have other servers, other VMs, you can put VM01 or VM03. You cannot put VMAD because VMAD does not have SQL Server installed on it. Okay. Then authentication. How do you want to connect? So if you click on this drop down, so we have Windows authentication. These are the two main authentication we use on-prem, while these other ones are used in the cloud for the most part. See, that's why you have Azure there. Anytime you see Azure, it means cloud. But these two are on-prem. On-prem means on premises, means in the office. Cloud means in the cloud. It's like a data center that is not managed by your company, by third-party companies such as Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and the likes. So this is cloud. So, but for the sake of this bootcamp, we are going to be using only Windows and SQL Server. We're not going to be using any of these. This one's we're not using. Just the first two, Windows and SQL Server authentication. And then if you're using Windows authentication, this will be grayed out because SQL Server is connected to your Active Directory. So it's fetching this from the Active Directory. That's why it's grayed out. You don't need to put any password. You'll get a password from Active Directory and it will automatically use the same login you use to connect to the VM, which is this. But if you change this to SQL Server, then you'll be asked to provide the username, as well as the password. Because SQL Server authentication is not connected to the Active Directory. It is done at the SQL Server level. So you have to supply these two values to be able to connect. Okay? And if you come to options here, there are other settings that people do here that you may not want to stress yourself about much for now. Sometimes you might need to check all of this for security reasons. You might need to adjust these in case you're having a hard time to connect. And if you come to, oh no, sorry about that. Oh, it's disappeared. So to connect, you can either click on this icon or you can click on connect itself. Okay, either or. So if I click on this, it will bring me here. Click on options, then additional parameters. You can put some keyword here to modify how you connect, such as application intent, was read only, or stuff like that. But don't worry yourself too much about this. If you are doing always encrypted, which is a type of encryption, then this. But we're not going to worry about this for now. We're going to talk about encryption later in the bootcamp. So these are the ways by which you can modify the way you connect. But let's connect to database engine, VM02 server, and we are using the Windows authentication. So I'm going to click connect. Okay, so now I'm connected. So here, see, here we, okay, let me expand this guy. Here, what you see here is the name of the instance that you are connected to, in this case, VM02. So if you have a default instance, when you connect to that default instance will take the name of the server. Will take the name of the virtual machine. In this case, VM02 on the Object Explorer. But remember, if you are on the Configuration Manager, how do you identify a default instance? You will see MS SQL Server. But on the Object Explorer, you will see the name of the virtual machine or the name of the server. Okay? And then this tells you that it's SQL Server. This tells you the version. 13 is 2016. Then this one tells you the login you're using to connect. Okay, all right. So if I open databases, this is where you find databases. So this I wait here. This is a user database. Then here you have system database. This system database, they come with SQL Server. Once you install SQL Server, they come with it pre-installed. But this one, I created this one after installation. So this one is created by a user, which was me. But this one, you don't have to create them. They come with it automatically. We are going to talk more about different types of databases. And then database snapshot. If you ever take a snapshot of your database, it's going to appear here. All right, so let's now look at the different system databases we have. If you expand this, you're going to see these guys. These are the system databases. We have master, model, MSDB, and TempDB. Okay, another typical interview question here. It can ask you what are the system databases and differentiate between them. All right, so we're going to explore all of these in detail later. Let's talk about security. If you ever need to secure your data, this is where you would come. So this helps you to allow or disallow connection. Everyone here, any login here will be able to connect to SQL Server as long as it is enabled. But even if they are here and you disable them, they will not be able to connect. But anyone whose login is not here would not be able to connect. And here you have server roles, the different server roles. And the roles, they will determine the kind of permission you have. And the kind of permission you have will determine what you can do on SQL Server. And here you have credentials. Don't worry yourself too much about credentials, this cryptography, and then auditing is just if you are doing audits. There are different types of audit. You have login audit, where you audit who has access, what permission do they have, why do they have those, and all those things. It depends on the company. Some companies do monthly, some do quarterly, some do yearly. Okay, but we will not talk more about all of this. We will only talk more about logins and server roles because of time. Because those are more like the most critical stuff that you deal with almost every day. All right, and now server objects. So, and in the server object area, see backup devices, where you can back up your database to endpoints. These are just network endpoints. They determine connection between two servers. And then linked servers. So this is like a bridge between two instances or two servers. Like a bridge between them. You want to link them together so you can pull data from one to the other. Then triggers. These guys will get fired if something happens, if an event happens. So it will fire these triggers. Yeah. So if you ever set or create server level triggers, they would appear here. But you can also create triggers at the database level, but this one will be under the server level. Then replication. This is a way of having your data on multiple servers. So you replicate them across multiple servers. So that if one server goes down, you have access to it on the other one. Or if you don't want to put too much workload on one server, you can replicate them onto another server and you start working on that server. So it basically is like you are offloading the workload from one server to another. And Polybase is more like linked server, but it's not exactly. This one also helps you to create a bridge to other servers. For example, other relational, or not say relational, other database management systems. Where you can pull data through Polybase from a database system like MongoDB. You can pull the data into SQL Server using Polybase. We will not explore this because it's not really common. Then this is very common. Always on. This is how we create high availability to make sure our data is highly available every time, whether we are doing maintenance or not. We'll make sure that this will help you to make sure that your data is highly available. The management. This is how we're going to maintain or manage SQL Server. This one is integration. If you are doing integration, like I told you that one of the services we have in SQL Server is integration services. You can manage those here. Then this is the agent that would help to manage jobs and alerts. So if you create jobs, everything will be under here. So let me expand these ones. Replication. Nothing much to discuss here for now. So when we talk about replication, we'll go in depth into all of this publication. So the concept of replication is that you are replicating data from a publisher to a subscriber through a distributor. And if you set that up, you will see all this information here. But now we don't have it set up, so it's empty. And okay, so here, always on is not enabled, so we can't see anything here. So when we get to always on, we'll enable that, then we'll be able to explore what is inside of this folder. Management. Okay. So you can manage policy. So when you see this red X here, that means you are disabled in a way. So this one. You can create extended events, which is basically used to capture, activities going on your server or performance metrics on your server. You can create maintenance plan. When we get to maintenance plan, we'll talk more about this. This is done to make sure that your SQL Server or your database are running optimally. The same way we maintain our car, change the oil, go for tire rotation, alignment, check brakes and all that. We do maintenance for our databases too. Then SQL Server logs. This will tell you everything that has been going on in your SQL Server, when it's restarted, when something happens, stuff like that. They are recorded in the log. So if something bad happens and you need to troubleshoot, you can go to these logs to find information about what happened. Then database mail. So you can receive emails from SQL Server about something happening in your SQL Server. You can, for example, if a job runs successfully, or if it fails, or if something happens, if the database is created, stuff like that. You can get that by creating a database mail. Distributed transaction coordinator. Don't worry yourself much about this. Then I already mentioned integration services. So then let me expand this one. Oh, sorry. Yep. So jobs. So if you create jobs, they'll be here. So jobs are just if you ever need to do something, and instead of doing that manually, you put it in the job and you schedule it to run. For example, if I need to take a backup of a database, let's say at 2 a.m., instead of me staying up late till 2 a.m. to run or take the backup manually, I can create a job. The query that I want to use to create the backup, I can put it in that job and schedule that job to run at 2 a.m. and I can go to sleep. And if everything works fine, if there's no error in the query, it will take the backup for you. And when you wake up, you can confirm that. So it's really good for automation. And then if you have several jobs and you want to monitor them, you can leverage this guy to show you what is happening to all those jobs. So we can also set up alerts, such as if something happens on your SQL Server, if someone deletes something, if someone creates a database, if someone delete a database, you can get alerts about those things. Then operator, these are the people that will receive mails, like those the database mail I mentioned earlier. These are the people that can receive database mail. It could be an individual, it could be like a group. Yeah, so those are the operators. Then proxies are more like login that we create when certain people do not have elevated permission to do some stuff. For example, for you to be able to run integrated SSIS package, SSIS means SQL Server Integration Services. For you to be able to run package, you must have sysadmin server role. But if you don't have sysadmin server role and you still want to run integration services, you can create a proxy for you that will allow you to be able to do that. And apart from that, there are other things that you can create proxy for, just to give people some level of permission to do some things. And error logs, activities, things going wrong in the server, and SQL Server, everything will be here. So the error logs will be basically used for troubleshooting. When things go wrong, you want to go there and see, okay, what happened at yesterday when we lost connection? What happened at this time when the database was slow? What happened? Stuff like that. And then this guy, don't worry yourself much about this. So basically, this is Management Studio in a nutshell. So now let's demo how making changes on the configuration manager can affect how we connect. So right now I'm able to connect, like I said, and the reason is because, let me try to minimize this guy. See if you allow me to do that. Okay. Yeah, I wanna be able to see both of them at once. And the reason why we're able to connect is because this guy, the database service is running. So let's see what happens if it stops running. So disconnect, come here, right click, stop. It says if you stop this, it will also stop the agent. This is just a quick demo, but we're going to talk more about this when we get to permissions. So now it is stopped. So if you click anywhere outside of you have refresh, everything is stopped now. But this was already stopped initially, but now we have the engine stop. So now the way we try to connect earlier, let's do the same thing again. And let's click connect. See, once it takes more than 1 second, most likely it won't connect. So now we will not be able to connect because the engine that we want to connect to is not running. It's like you want the car to move, but the engine is not running and you're not pushing the car. So how will the car move? So if anyone is unable to connect to SQL Server, the first place you want to check is to check the configuration manager, especially when they tell you that this is the error they are having. If they are having this error, you want to check the configuration manager to see if the database service is running or not. See, we will not be able to connect as long as that database engine is stopped. Okay, so let me turn it back on, click on it, right click, start. And now let's try to connect again. Bam, see, one time. Once it's running and you have permission to connect, you will connect immediately in less than a second. Okay, so this will cover everything about introduction to SQL Server, Configuration Manager, and Management Studio. So I will see you in the other recording. So in the other recording, I will talk more about database objects. We'll talk more about database objects, different database types. I think I mentioned them briefly, but I'll go in detail. I'll go in depth to explain them. Thank you for watching.